Chocolate is supposed to be a simple indulgence, right? Cocoa, sugar, maybe some milk, a treat you can enjoy without worrying too much. But here's the disturbing truth that the chocolate industry desperately doesn't want you to know. Most chocolate sold in United States supermarkets isn't actually chocolate. I'm talking about products that contain more vegetable oil than cocoa, products with child labor in their supply chains, and products so loaded with artificial ingredients that they barely qualify as food. The chocolate industry has convinced United States that cheap chocolate bars are harmless treats, when in reality many contain palm oil, artificial flavors, and cocoa sourced from farms using child slavery. Some products labeled chocolate contain so little actual cocoa they can't legally be called chocolate in many countries. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which chocolate brands to avoid and why they're not what you think. Number 1. Russell Stover. This is the brand people buy when they want to be safe. It's sold nationwide across the United States in Walmart, CVS, Walgreens, airport kiosks, grocery chains, and online retailers. It's the default chocolate gift for Valentine's Day, Christmas, Mother's Day. Neatly boxed, familiar logo. A sense of tradition that traces back to the early 20th century. When people reach for Russell Stover, they're not looking for indulgence. They're looking for reassurance. That reassurance doesn't come from the ingredient list. When you turn the box around and read the fine print, many Russell Stover chocolate products list palm kernel oil as a primary fat. Palm kernel oil is not cocoa butter. Cocoa butter is what defines real chocolate's texture, melt point, and mouthfeel. It melts just below body temperature. That's why real chocolate disappears smoothly on your tongue. Palm kernel oil doesn't behave that way. It's a refined vegetable fat chosen because it's cheap, shelf-stable, and easy to mass-produce. Its presence signals something important. You're no longer dealing with chocolate made primarily from cacao. You're dealing with compound-style formulations designed to reduce cost. This isn't illegal, but legality isn't the same as honesty. When a product presents itself as classic American chocolate while quietly replacing cocoa butter with palm-derived fats, it crosses a line of trust, especially when the price doesn't reflect that downgrade. These boxes aren't inexpensive. You're paying a premium for presentation while the formula underneath has been optimized for margins, not integrity. There's also a nutritional consequence. Palm kernel oil is high in saturated fat. Combined with refined sugar, emulsifiers, and flavorings, it creates a hyper-palatable product that's easy to overconsume. This isn't about fear, it's about patterns. Diets high in ultra-processed foods built on refined oils and sugars are consistently associated with metabolic stress, inflammation, and disrupted appetite signaling. The body doesn't register these foods as satisfying. It registers them as noise. And then there's the part no one wants to talk about. Chocolate doesn't start in a factory, it starts on cacao farms, primarily in West Africa. Decades of reporting from major outlets have documented how child labor persists in the global cocoa supply chain, despite public commitments from large manufacturers. Russell Stover sources cocoa from that same global system. The brand does not offer clear, front-facing transparency reports that allow consumers to trace where their cocoa comes from or how labor risks are mitigated. Silence doesn't prove guilt, but it doesn't build trust either. So here's the conclusion I came to after looking at the label, the sourcing context, and the nutritional reality. Russell Stover isn't poison, it isn't a scandal, it's something more common and more dangerous. A product that feels safe enough to stop questioning. Chocolate that looks traditional while cutting quiet corners. Chocolate that turns a treat into a habit without delivering real nourishment or real transparency. Read ingredient lists. Watch for palm kernel oil replacing cocoa butter. Treat boxed chocolates as what they are, ultra-processed confections, not harmless staples. And if chocolate is going to be part of your life, choose brands that are willing to show their work. Because when a product depends on you not looking too closely, that's usually a sign you should. Number 2. Keebler Fudge Stripes. This one hides in plain sight. It doesn't even pretend to be premium chocolate. It lives in the cookie aisle, stacked next to lunchbox snacks and late-night comfort food. For many Americans, it's tied to childhood. That matters because nostalgia lowers our guard. We stop reading labels. We trust the feeling instead. But when I read the ingredients slowly, line by line, the story changed. The so-called fudge coating isn't chocolate in the traditional sense. It relies heavily on soybean oil, and palm kernel oil. Those oils sit at the foundation of the coating, not cocoa butter. That single detail explains everything about the texture, the waxy finish, the way it doesn't melt cleanly, the greasy film left behind after a few bites. Palm kernel oil is solid at room temperature, cheap, and shelf-stable. It's widely used in compound coatings because it mimics firmness without delivering chocolate's natural melt. The problem isn't just taste. It's how easily this formulation encourages overconsumption. Refined flour, refined sugar, and refined oils are engineered to bypass satiety. You don't feel finished. You feel prompted to reach for another stripe, then another. From a health perspective, this matters. Diets dominated by ultra-processed foods built on refined vegetable oils and sugars are associated with increased metabolic strain and low-grade inflammation over time. No single cookie causes disease, but patterns matter, and products like this are designed to fit seamlessly into daily routines without ever asking you to stop. The conclusion is simple. Keebler fudge stripes aren't chocolate cookies. They're oil-based confections shaped like comfort. If you want a cookie, call it a cookie, but don't mistake this for chocolate. And don't let nostalgia make decisions your body has to live with. Number 3. Lindt, as sold across U.S. retail shelves. This one is more complicated. Lindt carries a reputation for refinement, Swiss heritage, gold wrappers, smoothness. When people buy Lindt in the United States, they assume a standard without question. And that assumption is where the problem begins. Not every Lindt product sold in the U.S. is made in Switzerland. Some are produced in other countries under different manufacturing conditions while carrying the same branding and price expectations. That information isn't hidden, but it's quiet. You have to look for it. Most people don't. They trust the name on the front, not the fine print on the back. U.S. labeling laws allow it. The issue is expectation versus reality. When consumers pay premium prices, they believe they're buying higher standards, not just smoother marketing. Like most large chocolate manufacturers operating at scale, Lindt sources cocoa from regions where labor abuses in the cacao sector have been repeatedly documented by investigative journalists and international organizations. Commitments exist, certifications exist, but full transparency remains limited. From a health standpoint, Lindt isn't junk in the same way as oil-based coatings, but the premium halo creates its own risk. People eat more when they believe a product is inherently better. They question less. They portion less carefully, and that psychological effect is powerful. Here's where I landed. Lindt isn't the worst option on the shelf, but it's also not the clean, unquestionable choice many Americans think it is. When trust is based on reputation instead of verification, consumers lose leverage. And in a system this large, leverage is the only thing that ever forces change. Number 4. Snickers. Few products are as embedded in American culture as this bar. It's been around since the 1930s, marketed as fuel for busy people, athletes, workers, anyone who needs energy fast. That message never really changed. A Snickers isn't framed as candy. It's framed as function, hunger control, productivity, get through the day. When you strip the branding away, what's left is a formula built on nougat, caramel, refined sugar, and fat, wrapped in a thin layer of chocolate-flavored coating. Depending on the specific product and market, palm oil appears in Mars's supply chain and ingredient ecosystem, particularly through derivatives and suppliers. That matters because palm oil isn't just a nutritional issue, it's an environmental one. Palm cultivation has been directly linked to deforestation and habitat destruction in Indonesia and Malaysia for decades. Those costs don't show up on the label, then there's the calorie math. One standard Snickers bar delivers roughly 250 to 280 calories in a few minutes, primarily from sugar and fat. The energy spike is real. So is the crash. Blood glucose rises quickly, insulin follows, and hunger returns faster than it should. That's not nourishment. Mars, like other multinational chocolate giants, has issued commitments around ethical sourcing. But the global cocoa industry remains deeply entangled with child labor, particularly in Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire, where the majority of the world's cocoa is grown. Investigative reporting over the last 20 years has shown how these issues persist despite voluntary programs. Snickers isn't a villain, it's a system, a product engineered for convenience, profit, and habit, not long-term well-being. And when something is that normalized, it rarely gets questioned. Number 5. Kit Kat. As sold in the United States. In the U.S., Kit Kat is manufactured by Hershey under license, not by Nestlé directly. That distinction matters because it explains why the formulation differs from country to country. When I reviewed the U.S. ingredient list, one detail stood out immediately: refined palm kernel oil. Palm kernel oil appears early in the formulation, ahead of cocoa butter. That single choice reshapes the entire product. Palm kernel oil is solid, shelf-stable, and inexpensive. It creates a coating that holds its shape, but doesn't melt cleanly at body temperature. That's why Kit Kat has that familiar waxy feel, why it coats the mouth instead of dissolving. That sensation isn't subjective, it's physics. From a health perspective, this formulation combines refined flour from the wafer, refined sugar, and refined fats. It's the textbook definition of ultra-processed, easy to eat quickly, hard to feel satisfied by. Over time, diets heavy in these combinations are associated with increased inflammation and disrupted hunger signaling. Again, no single bar causes disease, but repeated exposure rewires habits. There's also the ethical layer. The cocoa in Kit Kat still originates from the same global system that has struggled for decades with labor abuses. Public commitments exist. Progress is often promised, but independent reporting continues to show how far the industry remains from eliminating these practices entirely. So the conclusion here, it's structural. Kit Kat in the US isn't really a chocolate break. It's a fat and sugar break, built on palm-derived oils and a supply chain that remains opaque. When you understand that, the product doesn't taste the same anymore. Number 6. Hershey's. This one is uncomfortable because it's personal for a lot of Americans. Hershey's isn't just a chocolate brand. It's a symbol. It shows up in childhood memories, school fundraisers, movie nights, s'mores by a fire. It feels American in a way few food brands do. And because of that, it rarely gets questioned, but scale changes everything. Hershey's mass-market bars are produced at enormous volume and sold everywhere in the United States, from gas stations to big-box retailers to vending machines. That level of reach requires consistency, cost control, and supply chains that stretch across continents. Chocolate at this scale doesn't begin with flavor, it begins with logistics. From a formulation standpoint, Hershey's classic bars are relatively simple, but simplicity doesn't equal purity. They are high in refined sugar, modest in cocoa content, and designed for maximum shelf stability. That alone wouldn't make them controversial. The deeper issue sits further upstream, long before a bar is wrapped in foil. Hershey's, along with other major companies, has faced lawsuits and public scrutiny over whether its supply chains adequately prevent forced and child labor. The company has issued statements, joined industry initiatives, and announced remediation programs. Yet follow-up investigations continue to show how slow and incomplete progress has been. Cocoa prices are kept low. Farmers remain underpaid. And when margins are tight, the burden falls on families and children. This matters because when a product is cheap, someone else is absorbing that cost. And when a product is trusted, scrutiny fades. That combination is powerful. From a health perspective, Hershey's bars reinforce another kind of normalization. They teach the body to associate sweetness with comfort and routine. High sugar intake drives rapid blood glucose spikes, followed by crashes that encourage repeated snacking. Over time, this pattern contributes to metabolic stress and weight gain, not because chocolate is inherently harmful, but because it's been engineered to be eaten mindlessly. Here's the conclusion I reached after looking at Hershey's honestly. This isn't about villainizing a brand. It's about recognizing what happens when chocolate becomes an industrial commodity instead of a deliberate food. The ethics become diluted, the nutrition becomes secondary, and consumers are left with nostalgia instead of knowledge. Stop treating mass-market chocolate as harmless by default. Eat it less often, read labels more carefully, and understand that when transparency is missing at this scale, silence usually protects the system, not the people inside it. After walking through what mass-market chocolate really looks like in the United States, this is usually where people ask the same question. So what's left? If most of what's cheap, familiar, and everywhere is compromised in some way, does that mean chocolate itself is the problem? The problem isn't chocolate. The problem is how far most products have drifted from what chocolate actually is. This is where the shift happens, not from fear, but from awareness. First, Who Kitchen. Who is a US-based brand that built its identity around one simple idea: stop adding things chocolate doesn't need. Their bars are widely sold across Whole Foods, Target, and online retailers. When you read the ingredient list, it's noticeably short. Cocoa mass, cocoa butter, unrefined sweeteners like coconut sugar in some varieties, no palm oil, no palm kernel oil, no artificial emulsifiers layered in to stabilize cheap fats. That absence matters. Cocoa butter has a specific melting point just below body temperature. When Who uses it as the primary fat, the chocolate behaves the way chocolate is supposed to behave. It melts cleanly, it tastes concentrated, and because the flavor is more intense, people tend to eat less without trying to. From a health standpoint, that matters more than perfection. Fewer ingredients, less ultra-processing, fewer triggers for mindless eating. Second, Alter Eco. Alter Eco operates at a slightly larger scale, but keeps its priorities visible. This brand is known for being palm oil-free across its chocolate line, a decision that directly addresses both health and environmental concerns. Palm oil doesn't appear quietly on the label because it isn't there. That's a conscious cost. Alter Eco also emphasizes fair trade and organic sourcing, particularly in South America. Those certifications aren't magic shields, but they do create accountability. They require audits. They require documentation. They make it harder for exploitation to hide in silence. From a nutritional standpoint, Alter Eco's darker bars shift the balance away from sugar and toward cocoa solids. That means more polyphenols, less sweetness, and a slower, steadier metabolic response. You don't get the same spike and crash cycle that defines candy bars. You get something closer to a food. Third, Taza chocolate. This is where transparency stops being a slogan and becomes paperwork. Taza is a U.S. craft chocolate maker known for its direct trade model. The company publishes detailed transparency reports that outline where its cacao comes from, how much farmers are paid, and how those payments compare to commodity prices. This isn't marketing language, it's data. Taza's chocolate is stone ground, which gives it a slightly gritty texture that surprises people at first. That texture is the point. It signals minimal processing. It reminds you that this came from beans, not a factory shortcut. And like other high cacao chocolates, it naturally slows consumption. The intensity demands attention. The health benefit here isn't a miracle. It's restraint. Chocolate that asks you to pause instead of pushing you to binge. So here's the real takeaway. Choosing better chocolate isn't about chasing purity. It's about reducing everyday risk. Fewer hidden oils, more transparency, more trust. When chocolate is made honestly, it doesn't need to be eaten mindlessly. And when you change that relationship, the entire experience shifts. Chocolate in the United States didn't become a problem overnight. It became a problem slowly, as real ingredients were swapped for cheaper ones, as supply chains stretched further away from accountability, and as consumers were taught not to ask questions. The shift doesn't require perfection. It requires honesty. Real awareness begins when you stop asking, "Is this allowed?" and start asking, "Is this aligned with what I actually want for my body and the world I participate in?" Those are very different questions. Healing, in this context, doesn't mean detoxes or extreme rules. It means restoring discernment, eating chocolate less often but with intention, understanding that darker chocolate with higher cocoa content isn't about being virtuous. It's about respecting how your metabolism works. Slower absorption, less sugar, more awareness of when you've had enough. The chocolate industry will not change because of outrage alone. It changes when buying habits change, when people stop rewarding shortcuts, when they stop confusing tradition with integrity, when they stop mistaking silence for safety. Chocolate can still be part of your life. It can still be joyful, but joy doesn't have to come with hidden costs. Not to your health, not to someone else's childhood, and not to your peace of mind.